Pennsylvania, Pro Wrestling Rampage. Man here that rampaged last show. Good Lord.
That's what I like to do.
6'6".
280 pounds. It fluctuates, though. It fluctuates. So sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less.
Depending on if you're going by the snack bar, it could.
Depends on if I'm motivated or not.
It could happen.
Exactly. Or if it's before a show or after a show. If it's after the show.
Endgame Paul Jordane, kind enough to spend a couple moments with us. 10 years in the business.
Yep.
Like, my goodness.
Around. It started in the South, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and moved up to Maryland. Did that for a while, and kind of all over a little bit. A bunch of smaller companies all over the place, so up and down the East Coast, basically.
How much does the travel take a toll on you?
Yeah, say that again.
How much does the travel take a toll on you?
The main toll that it takes on me, I think back in the day it was tougher on the guys because they didn't have the internet and they didn't have podcasts and things like that.
Right.
So I stay pretty occupied while I'm on the road. But the problem for me is being a much larger person. My hips start hurting sitting down for too long, and I have to stop and take walks every couple of hours just because I can't just sit cramped up in a car for too long. It doesn't matter how big the car is. Sitting down for that long, it's just too much compression on you. So it physically it takes out more than you would really think.
Now, you were in WWE Developmental.
Yeah, in Developmental FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling.
What was that whole experience like?
It was a warehouse with a couple rings. that was the performance center. That was it. And we did promos. They had a camera, and you do your promos, and then you wrestled in the rings. That was what it was. Every day we wrestled, we trained, and then we would travel on the weekends and do local FCW shows, which is kind of like what they do now with NXT. Right. They have their smaller NXT shows in that local area.
How much of that experience do you carry with you?
Oh, a lot of it. That was where I learned most of my pro wrestling. I mean, just being there with the top trainers in the world, like Norman Smiley, Tom Pritchard, Dusty Rhodes worked with us on promos, Steve Kern, Skinner. Then they would have guests come in and kind of talk with the guys and work with us a little bit. And that was always cool too. I mean, just you pick up a little bit of everything as you go. And I picked up probably a lot of what I do now is kind of based off of a lot of the things that I learned then. But it took me time to really understand what the teachings were. It took a lot of time.
How long do you think that takes?
It depends on the person.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on the person and their experiences and who brought them in. I wasn't broken in by people who had real legitimate experience.
Gotcha.
So whenever I went to FCW, that was whenever I got the legitimate experience, and then I saw how to properly be trained. And then, that's a hard thing in pro wrestling.
And I think that's the key is finding that proper.
You have to have a good foundation. If there's one thing that I would say to any wrestler who wants to start, who's like a younger wrestler, find a reputable school. That's first and foremost, because they'll set you off on the right step instead of chugging along and you have all these really bad habits that you have to break.
What was it like working with Dusty Rhodes?
It was surreal. You grow up watching this person, and then they're right there in front of you, giving you advice, trying to tell you how to be, a little bit more entertaining, how to be a little bit more, how to put some more flair into it. No pun intended, but it was. At first, it was very intimidating because it's Dusty Rhodes, and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to talk around him, let alone cut promos. But then, after a little while, he'd come around and really give you some really good advice, catered to you, which is really good. A lot of people give general information, and that's fine, but you really need that stuff that's catered to you because you're individual.
Now, if you had to go back in time and face a Paul Jordane, say like at 20, 22 years old, knowing what you know now about the pro wrestling business, what advice would you give him?
That's a good question. Reputable school.
No.
Reputable school. Number one, be around people who have good experience and who have been to places that you want to be. That's the number one way to learn how to do it.
Endgame Paul Jordane, if you're here at PWR, definitely come down here and see this man.
Come down here and watch me whoop some butt.
But there we go.
Thank you, bud.